Everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Dr. Katherine McAllen, the Director of the Center for Latin American Arts, and welcome to our space representing the talents and future and success of the College of Fine Arts here at the library. And we're really honored to have Penny de los Santos today to join us and talk about her art practice. And we're really honored to have our two photography professors, Romeo de Loretto and DM Whitman, here to be as panelists and to share about their art practice as well. And we're really looking forward to having some nice dialogues and sharing ideas and fielding some questions and conversations from everyone here today. We're excited to talk about creativity and storytelling and inspiration for art practices and art history in all fields. And we're excited to introduce Penny de los Santos, who just came in from New York. Thank you, Penny. And Penny's going to talk about a few images from her career and current works and previous work she's done here in South Texas. And then we'll hear from DM and Romeo about their practice, and then take some questions and have discussions. So without further ado, I'll introduce Penny. Penny is a Mexican-American visual storyteller, photographer, and director based in Brooklyn, New York. And from the historical all-male dining clubs of the Basque Country to the markets of Jerusalem, photographing culture has been at the heart of Penny's work. It has influenced the subjects she picks and the way she makes photographs. And Penny holds a master's degree from Ohio University's School of Visual Communication and an undergraduate degree in journalism from Texas A&M University in College Station. And she's been a featured speaker at many universities and industry conferences throughout the U.S. and abroad. She has a thriving podcast, commercial business, and also is a very talented visual artist in photography. And in 2023, she started her podcast, Depth of Field, which is on her website, pennydelosantos.com. And it debuted at #1 in the category of visual arts that year. So we're excited to hear her brief remarks on her work and then discuss some topics with her. So welcome, Penny.
Thank you. First, I just want to say thank you for having me, Dr. McAllen, and all of you for coming and bearing witness to my story. I'm very honored. I was just blown away. I saw like 6 MFA students' studios and their work, and I was so inspired. What an opportunity you all have to develop your vision, and I kind of wish I would have got an MFA. But at the heart of my work is storytelling, and my work is founded in identity, place, and culture. But really, it's about identity. I first started photographing to understand my own personal background and where I came from. And I started photographing in South Texas. I spent 10 years of my career photographing along the U.S.-Mexican border with Texas for National Geographic magazine. I got a grant from them, and then I later started working with them. But they really developed me as a visual storyteller. So I learned a lot about gaining access, becoming a part of a community, earning trust, and then learning how to storytell, really, and honor these stories. But I became a photographer because I wanted to understand my own complicated cultural background. So I felt like I needed to start with those photographs. This is something I did. This is from the piece I did for National Geographic. It's actually not that far from here. I think it's in Alice, Texas. And this is 2 twin sisters waiting for their dates for the quinceañera. For those 10 years when I was working on this project, I, slept on people's couches. I got a certain amount of money and I stretched it as far as I could. And I think that's what you do in your practice. You take advantage of the opportunities that you're given and you just go for it. Can you go to the next one? This is at the Pulga in Alamo. When you're a young artist and you're just starting out, you're not making a lot of money. Nobody talked to me about how to make a living as an artist. So it was really difficult. But I quickly realized that if I was going to make anything work for myself, I had to figure out how I could make a living and also tell visual stories. Can you go to the next one? This is the you've all seen this in different versions, but this is a barbacoa. They're all night cooking the barbacoa. I showed up. I was there all night. But in the morning, I went back, showered, came back, and this was the scene, at like 10 a.m. And I was like, That's a photograph. You go to the next one. Identity, the diaspora of the American immigrant and all variations has been my life's work, understanding what it means to be American hyphenated. And I find that to be one of my obsessions. And whenever I'm given the opportunity, I'm pointing my camera in the direction of immigrants or borders. I find them to be places where culture is really defined. I also love that I do feel like immigrants carry their culture with them on their backs and they create it wherever they land. These are actual, they're picking grapes on Long Island in New York. This is in Oaxaca, Mexico. So I started doing magazine work. I got in with National Geographic, and then I quickly got in with a travel magazine because I had learned how to take landscapes. And when you're photographing geography in place, you have to be able to really capture landscapes. And that's all about lighting and timing, and then also energy. So this is in Oaxaca. I don't even think this scene exists really anymore. It's changed so much, but this is at night. You know, a lot of the taqueria is just, I don't know why I'm telling you guys this. I'm sure you've seen all this before, but this is a scene. This is actually in South Texas. Actually, this is in West Texas. I was following the subject down a dusty road. This is a really nuanced photograph, and I'm not sure you can really appreciate it from here, but it's just a beautiful landscape of place. I learned early on that a photograph should be about emotion and composition, color, and light. And when you can base your photographs on those ideas, you can come out with a really beautiful moment. It does take a lot of practice. I spend a lot of time with my subjects, days, weeks. I was talking with another graduate student earlier, and it's all about consent and access. So it means I spend a lot of time. I have to prove myself to a lot of the people I photograph because I don't want to just go in there and take something from them. For me, I really want to honor their story and bear witness to their life. So I started doing more magazine work. This is actually a story on tequila, and that's in Jalisco, Mexico. And these are the agaveros harvesting the heart of the agave. This is also, these are Basque immigrants who work as herders in Iowa. There's a whole Basque contingency of sheep herders in Iowa, which I had no idea existed. So I spent like a week with them as they were herding sheep from one range to another. This is from the back of the truck. That's just another image from that story. This is in India. These are migrant laborers who are picking chilies. India is one of the largest producers of chilies in the world. So I spent a few days with these people harvesting chilies in the fields in Hyderabad. This is also at the market in Hyderabad. Just a beautiful place, showing a sense of place, trying to convey emotion and vibrancy through color and time of day. And this is in Sicily after they are harvesting olives. And again, just trying to capture a moment and tell a story in a single frame while also giving it a geographical context. So because I was doing a lot of this storytelling, Kingsford Charcoal commissioned me to go around the country and document whatever I wanted around barbecue culture, which was like, whoa, I felt like I won the lottery. And they asked me where I wanted to go. They gave me three different locations. I could pick 3 locations anywhere in the US. So of course I was like, I definitely want to go and do carne asadas because I want to represent that for barbecue in the US. I feel like it's not something you normally see. This was a billboard campaign. And then I did church barbecues in Alabama, which was incredible. So beautiful. I'm showing you a few of these images. So this is a way in which my work translated for more of a global brand. And I was able to, I live in New York City, the most expensive city in the US, probably the world now. So I definitely have to make a living. And this is one of the ways I was able to kind of move into commercial work, which is something, again, I wish my professors would have told me when I was in graduate school about how am I going to make a living when I'm done learning how to be creative and how to tell stories. So I'd love to talk to you all about that. Just a few more examples from this Kingsford shoot I did. Yeah. And then I did something with also Anheuser-Busch. Again, it was about people and location. And so we were on a horse ranch in California. I have to think where exactly we were for a week. And I got to just like, these are all models. We cast them. Again, I wanted you guys to see the through line of where my work started and where I've landed. I feel like there's a real obvious connection. And the sweet spot is when those two, those three ideas, or those, when you're able to have your personal work mix with your commercial work, that is the sweet spot. And finding that was my goal. And I knew if I could get there, then I would be able to sustain myself as an artist and a storyteller.
Wonderful. And while we're showing slides, I think we'll just, I think it'd be nice for Romeo and DM to show your slides and talk briefly. And then we'll go into discussion. That works. And while we have the lights down, lighting's good. Lovely. Okay, so our next speaker is Romeo Di Loretto, our assistant professor of photography here at UTRGV. He's based mainly out of Brownsville. And as many of y'all know, he's a wonderful mentor and teacher and instructor to many students and a great colleague. So we're honored that you're here today to share with us, Romeo.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I was constricted for 5 minutes. So 5 minutes for me is not a lot. So I'm going to try to be very brief. I realized when I was thinking about this project of doing this kind of symposium, this roundtable discussion, how much I've grown in the last 3 years. I mean, it's incredible how much I've grown. A lovely comment was said just a minute ago by our guest about the graduate students, and to take advantage of this growth moment. I feel like I'm going back to graduate school right now. And it's the only reason why I'm throwing myself head over heels, because of a complete new world for me. You all know I'm from Italy. The Valley was a shock to me, not culturally. I came here purposely because I was offered other positions, but I came here purposely because the culture, the landscape shocked me. Just the name Valley shocked, because I didn't see a valley. But I do see a valley now, a very intriguing valley that I eventually will create another project on because of it. But I'm going to start by just talking about briefly the title of this whole kind of round talk that many of you guys probably are wondering. I mean, this punctum, photography is a catalyst. Now, when you start seeing the DM's work as well, and my work, and you'll start seeing connections. And these connections, not because the work are similar, but because of the concepts. And again, I believe, at least for me, I've grown and I've matured incredibly because of my concepts in my photography. That I'm not just visually seeing, I'm emotionally seeing, which is very, very important. I'm going to refer to Roland Barthes because he was a mentor to me. I wish I was able to meet this person, but in his writings, and I continually do. But again, even just the title, catalyst, and what a catalyst is. A catalyst is an agent of force that provokes change, that transforms or reacts without itself being consumed. In chemistry, it accelerates a process. In art or thought, it ignites new perspectives and movements. That is really brilliantly thought through, meaning that something so simple is encompassing everything in the arts. After I wrote, or I started thinking about myself as well, and my own work, and again, also the works of Roland Barthes, when he speaks about the cultural life, the cultural field of meaning and personal emotional wounds that pierce the viewer. And I think that is maybe the perfect description of what I am trying to do. Now, most of my work is, the title of the work, or these projects called is called Silent Silencio, Summerlands. Summerlands is a beautiful, in my opinion, dedication to the Valley, to this region. It's a place that I find extremely interesting because we're not here, we're not there, we're somewhere. We're playing on this beautiful tightrope that we can go this way, we can go that way, and it's okay to be on both. And I think that is very rare on this planet Earth to have such a strong cultural thing. I use the nature as my pivotal point. And it's probably coming from I feel good there. I want to somehow elude. I want my photographs to pierce. I want my photographs to not just be an image, but I want to be very strongly emotionally attached to it. And I want the viewer to feel that. I realized through time, I kept on hearing discourses that I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand this idea of the border. I really couldn't, because I'm coming from Italy. I'm coming from Europe. The borders existed. I understand them. I sympathize and understand them. So that's something that I continually thought through, because I had to see this border. I had to understand it. And I couldn't understand if I wasn't part of this culture. So at one point, I realized that much of my work was dealing with, and I started really thinking it through. And the border as not only as a physical thing, but as a pedagogical thing, as a threshold. And again, I'm going to continually use my word silence, perception, and I also started including the digital psyche, because I started getting more involved with my ideas. It might not appear that my work is not dealing with the border, but it's very strongly connected with the border. I mean, I don't talk about it very much, but this whole project started, say, Sable Palms National Sanctuary, when I started finding awkward objects on the floor, like a pair of socks, a shirt, and I didn't know. I completely naive to what was going on until I understood that that was a very specific spot in on the Rio Grande for crossings. And I started thinking about this word silence, and I started thinking how it felt to be in that situation and be silenced. And again, I find I'm very close to this idea, because my dad, at a very young age of 16, from Rome, started walking, and he walked to France. And at one point, I even asked him, what did you think about when you were walking? So I didn't think of anything. I just heard silence. But this came out a year and a half after I started work. So it's obviously it was a big part of me and who I am. Again, I think a nice kind of description I'm going to try to read to you: silence and the space between. And that is a very important part of my work. Not the physical actual photograph, but those spaces between that I'm going to try to clarify in some simple words. In my work, whether installation, teaching, or thought, because for me, it's all encompassing. I do find my teaching and my thought process, my dreams, my daydreaming, all part of my physical and visual work. And the more I'm maturing, the more I'm seeing is very, very evident. Okay, and then I said here, in my work, whether installation, teaching, or thought, seeking not to erase the border, but to reveal it. And again, if we want to think, for me, it's important that we reveal it, that we don't hide it, that we don't erase it, that we reveal it, to show where it holds, where it hurts, and where it might finally open. So I started thinking that in my work, and I started seeing this in my work. And again, these fragile little lines, actually, many of these things, came from students. Where I remember coming here the first term, I gave a project, which I never did, the photogram, and a student did this project, this piece that I didn't understand. It was a piece of lace with a tiny little thread. And I kept on telling this person, okay, what is this about? And they wouldn't tell me. And they poked, and I poked, and I poked, because I poked. I throw curveballs, and I poke, and I poke. Finally, this young person told me, you don't understand. And I said, no, I don't understand. And why is this thread? Why didn't you cut it off? And this person said, you don't understand, Professor. My life's a thread, and I can break it in any minute. And even now, I get emotionally strong. So when I started going out into the open, out into the wilderness, I started seeing that. So I started seeing this kind of space. For me, again, you're not going to see these images and maybe make a complete reference to the borders, to these things, but it's about emotion. I'm going to read a little bit of my artist statement, because I think that's important. Actually, I don't even like to call it an artist statement, but conceptual statement. I'll even read half of it, because I'm not sure how much time we have. But silent silences refers to the pause, the physical and emotional space between virtue and vice. In Zen Buddhism, which I'm strongly connected to, silence may represent truthfulness and the search for truth in practice. One can find this silence reflected between the repeated claustrophobic individual or claustrophobic, I'm not pronouncing it right? But again, events such as a gust of wind or the space between two crashing waves. In the exploration of my natural scenes, I seek a similar path, using the medium and the care of selection of materials and craftsmanship to represent the space. So for me, my work is not really about the physical object, but what I say, the space in between, where we have two images or one image where there's something in between. And that something in between is what I refer to as my silence, is a space where I also call, which I really like the word better in Italian, anima. Anima means soul. And I think that's the biggest part of my work, or at least the work I'm showing today or presenting today. I went on further to think through my work, and I'm starting to understand that the border is not only a physical border. I'm starting write quite a bit lately, and for me, it's more not only about the physical border, but also the emotional border, and now even the social border. And I'm writing these pretty interesting commentaries dealing with how intranet is creating borders. So we constantly talk about borders. We should be talking about borders because what are borders? Borders are something which are constraining us. They're not allowing us to do one thing, is to connect. Not to only be in a place, but to physically and to emotionally connect. So that's something that I felt very strong. It's very hard to maybe understand my work just seeing these. The presentation is very important. The spacing is very important. And the size is very important, meaning they're not all big. I often print extremely small purposely because I want my viewer to get close and so on, where it becomes an emotional thing. I'm trying to do this really quickly, and I'm really trying to condense a lot of, I think, personal thoughts. So I hope it was minimally understood from you all.
Thank you.
If anybody wants to know more about our MFA program, I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Yes, please, please come talk to us about that after this. And we have refreshments too, so everybody please stay after and visit with Penny, visit with DM, visit with Romeo and all of us to have a little fellowship and conversation time after. So without further ado, welcome DM Whitman, and thank you for participating.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate being invited and just being able to share a little bit about work that I have been working on for a few years. And as a visual artist, I'm talking about this these sort of terms like ecologies and ecotones, transitions. That is what a lot of my work deals with, along with environmental crises. So ecologies as a word literally means relationship. And so you can just sort of, and I'll ask you, like, this is a work that I traveled the world via the internet when Google Earth first hit. And it was a way for me to travel to historic sites of the Winter Olympics when I came across this research from a climate researcher who said that in as little as 10 years, these sites would no longer be snowy enough or cold enough to have the Olympics. So as a way to reduce the footprint, that carbon footprint, I traveled to these places via Google Earth and was able to make salted paper photographs, which is really the first means of a photographic image on the page that can be fixed. It's a handmade process, which really is what I'm drawn to. Coating a piece of silver, coating a piece of paper with silver, putting a negative or an object on top of that and exposing it to UV light. This is one of those, an example of an exhibition for this work, which was called Melt, where some of the images literally fade and disappear. And that was to parallel the concerns about sort of the disappearance of these places as cold climate. And this is when I received 2 grants for this work. This is my real first opportunity to create public engagement as well beyond an exhibition. And that grant allowed me to print over almost 300 postcards and mail them out to the public to try to engage in dialogue that was outside of the white, traditional gallery walls. And that project led me to work outside of my then studio at the time. My previous life, I was a field scientist and I worked quite a bit with threatened and endangered plant species. And so I found myself using these as references to look at this habitat, this transitional zone, this riparian intertidal marsh, which is this transitional space between saltwater and freshwater. And so using those skills, which I hadn't used for some time, I collected one of each species and made a photogram of those. These are very large. They're 26 inches. I have one really large contact printing frame that fits a 32-inch piece of paper. It's like a beast. I call it the beast. And so making these records, which serve as documents of a particular space and time. So I was really interested in, Penny, in your talk about place, you know, and how important that can be to our understanding. And so these are both, you know, they're memories, but they're also data. And that's how I come to understand them. They're unique, as most of my work is, and they're heavy, right? They have a certain thickness and a weight and serve more like objects than, you know, two-dimensional pieces. And that leads me to sort of getting to more of what I've been working on the last few years, is working with eco-distress and the sort of more intangible, harder things to talk about because they are, you know, the emotive states. So again, working with these handmade processes, materials from the 19th, process of the 19th century, materials of both painting and photography, techniques, gold leaf, vintage metal threads, handmade papers. So this was, I'll just point out, this is paper that I saved. I had made at an artist residency. And I went there to use the darkroom, and I ended up making paper for 6 weeks because it was empty and I could. And it was very labor intensive. It's labor intensive, like working in the darkroom. It has a lot, you have to have a lot of stamina, I would say. And so that paper found its way back. I almost threw it out a number of times, but ultimately it found its use. And in that project, at the same time as I was working on that project, I was working also on ideas of healing and sort of restoration, resiliency. What does it look to be maybe on the other side, and think about the yin yang, right? We have the processes of mourning and loss and grief, but we also have to think about healing and building. And so working with salt for the last few years. So those mourning pieces are salted paper, and these pieces are building, you know, cultivating salt crystals of various compositions, and then you know, essentially printing them. So salt has become a huge metaphor for me in the last few years, something that I haven't grown tired of working with, really. And this is just to share with you in terms of engagement. You can get to, these were at a few exhibitions in the last 2024 and 2025. This is of the Danforth Art Museum, where I was able to share this work and have some community engagement, where I had for instance, a wall that people were able to interact with, where they were able to come in and put Post-it notes. I had designed these wall spaces to allow for people to put Post-it notes, essentially, to talk about how they might have been feeling in relation to these topics, how they, you know, what do they do to sort of help, what do they do to feel better, kind of thing. And so the museum staff were really gracious, and that they collected these as the wall filled up, and then would save these for me. And so I still, you know, I'm still going through these because it's a really, it's a heavy lift in a way. It requires a lot of emotional space to, you know, some of these are from kids, from elementary school children. And so reading that is you know, it just requires a certain amount of space that I have to give myself. So I just wanted to share sort of some ways of engaging that are outside of sort of maybe what we think of as an exhibition, or you know, that we traditionally think of exhibitions. Yeah, so thanks very much, and happy to talk to anybody about the grad program or anyway.
Very great. Well, thank you so much, Dion. I had a few questions formulated as moderator, and I'll just ask a few and then open it up to the floor. If anybody else would like to ask anything or bring up a topic. My first question was just, I'll kind of go in order of y'all speaking. My first question was for Penny about revealing the human condition and your storytelling in a world of saturation of digital culture, AI, social media. How can photography still reveal the human condition? And how has the photographic act reshaped your perception of capturing truth?
I mean, it's changed. When I first started photographing, I didn't think about consent at all. Strangely, I didn't. I would just be able to walk any street and take anybody's photograph, and it wasn't a problem. And then I realized that I wanted to get in with communities where I could really tell stories. And then I realized consent was a really big deal. So I mean, AI is going to happen it's already happening. You can look at J. Crew's Instagram, and I know this firsthand. I mean, it's generated AI, and it's hard to tell their social media. And I know that because one of my assistants worked on the campaign and told me it's real. But I do think storytelling, authentic storytelling, and I can prove it. I just photographed thing for Kingsford this past summer. I think going to be an even more hunger for authenticity because everything is being questioned, and we got to find out who the source is before we believe it. And I do think original photography is still going to be very important. And after a while, AI is only trained on what we feed it, right? It's only so much before we start getting the same information back. So I don't think, I do think photography is going to still have a very strong market share.
No, it is. And I mean, I think you touch on that question of how has the meaning of looking changed in 2025? And how are you adjusting and learning and pivoting and growing with that as well? And inspiring.
I'm still figuring it out. It's changed. I mean, this is probably in in photography, I think in the last 2 years, it's completely been turned upside down, at least from my perspective and what I do and how I work. But I still think photography is very transformative, and you have to be very, very dedicated to find the truth and to be seen. But isn't that life already? I think the strongest thing we all have is a perspective. Our greatest thing is perspective. And sometimes that's scary, but we all have a perspective. Art is a reflection of our interior world. So finding that perspective, which so many of you have, the graduate students I met today, I was just like, wow. So perspective is key. And I think that's where your authentic self can really shine. And that's where I think transformation really happens, when you're willing and brave enough to explore your interior world and then create it or find it or reflect it.
So thank you so much. And Romeo, I had a question about the concept of silence, and I was really interested in your images because there's an element of abstraction in them and an element of minimalism that metaphorically connects to silence. And I was wondering about what's your opinion on how a photograph can speak through silence? And what role does absence or abstraction or restraint play in your visual language?
Obviously, silence has an important aspect. In terms of abstraction, that's a word that I personally hesitate to use because I find they're not abstract, that they're extremely full. Again, in this fullness is where I find my silence. What I'm trying to do visually is I try to subtract. And maybe that's also because of my deep love for Piet Mondrian and how his work was and what he did. Starvers like Eric Callahan and many others. But I like the idea of going out in a place where I'm seeing so much. And you cannot deny that if you're going into certain areas of southern Texas, it's full. The wilderness is full. I want to subtract it. So why? Because I'm starting to find my own self in it. I think it was very closely knit to what was just said about, the artificial intelligence is just reading us. Again, going back to this thing of punctum, this idea of what Roland Barthes told us. At one point, he tells us very bluntly that it's not just there, it's also the emotion, anima. And it's pretty good, AI, because I do tricks with it. I'm going backwards. I'll go back to my question because I play tricks with it. Every morning I go and I say some stupid thing and I try to do the same thing. Like I ask chat, I'm feeling sad today. What should I eat for breakfast? It gives me an answer. The next day I do the same thing, but I realize that I'm changing my tone of voice by how I hit my key of my bloody computer, and it's sensing things. So at one point it's not understanding, and I'm finding in my own self really being in silence, which is actually not even that silent. It's actually very loud. Silence is actually extremely loud. When you're in deep silence, you're actually hearing your blood. And that's something that really intrigues me. I'm very well connected to also the works of DM. Not similar, not in terms of the work, but in terms of the ideology. Because I'm very, very tightly, strongly knit with nature. Nature is a very, very important part to me. And that's what I'm liking in these conversations, that we're all so different, but we're not that different. Again, it's always coming back to this thing of igniting and this thing of poking and piercing. and the power of this medium that we're all three using in a different way. So for me, my silence is really not even that silent, but it's very silent. It's very inner. It's very personal. So I'm not sure if I'm answering a question that's heavily loaded, but I'm trying to.
Yeah, and I like that you talked about it being heavily personal and that our perspective is, and our voice is the most powerful part of creating. And what you said about the border, you locate the border between seeing and feeling. And that's such a powerful universal idea that has so many different unique interpretations and perspectives.
And they're united, and I think they're intertwined, and you can't separate them. If we separate them, there's nothing there. There can't be something there. It's like two polars, positive and negative. It's like physics. At the end, it's like science. What we learned in high school, we refused to learn, and that's why I'm in arts, because I refused it. I refused it completely. Now I'm going back to it, oddly enough, because that's what's interesting to me. What I refuse is now what I'm finding extremely interesting, because I'm keeping myself open. And I said this open is coming from, again, I'm bored of saying it, from silence. My inner thought, my inner peace, and my reactions to the world around me. Every piece of the world, from the positive to the negative, because we're living in a very unique time. Extremely, we all know this, but it's actually, for me, very energetic, dangerous, scary, angry many times when I watch the news, but it's really, really powerfully igniting. I don't see any way that any art student can produce right now in this 2025. There's so much from the ecology, which I'm really angry at, from politics, let's not get into, to all the rest. But anyways, I'm going to stop talking with that.
Well, and thank you so much. Yeah, and DM, speaking of ecology and eco distress, and many of these important topics, it's really inspiring how your practice is rooted in this technique and process, and the handmade process, and I'm really inspired by that, and experimenting with new media with salt, and it's really fascinating. And I was wondering, in your practice and photographing the environment, do you ever have a thought on when photography stops being documentation and becomes transformation, looking at this process? And
Yeah, I mean, I guess, using photographic materials, but I don't always consider them, I consider them they're photographic. That's what I would say. And I think that that's something that I'm striving for always, is this sort of transformation in terms of ideas, in terms of materials, something that is, for instance, these are essentially physical impressions of something that exists. It's, taking that plant, putting it on a piece of light sensitive paper, and then, letting it expose for the day, and then having a visual record. Right? So this is just a great example of how you can take something that exists and it becomes something else, right? In addition to a record. So I do think about that quite a bit. Because process, I feel like, is very important for me as an artist. The ability to work with, to touch the materials, the kinesthetic response, the smell, the tactile nature of the paper, and coding, and all the things that come along with it. It's just super important for, in terms of how I make as an artist. And, that's not how everyone relates, but for me, it's it's just pretty important.
Awesome. And if photography could catalyze one transformation in our world today, ethical, environmental, which one would you choose?
I don't find that they're able to be separated, quite honestly. I think those are rolled up, just like social justice and environmental justice are the same things, right? They were only recently separated in recent decades, but they are the same. So in my brain, I can't separate them. So I'll take a pass and say both.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I wanted to save some time for our audience and our colleagues and friends to ask a question. If you had anything that you wanted to ask our speakers about, if there is a slight pause. Yes, I did want to also ask Penny at some point if you could give a little bit of advice to your students, or to our students, about your entrepreneurship story. I think that's really important for our talented students working towards their professional development. And if you could just maybe give a little bit of advice that maybe you didn't have when you were their age, to pursue the entrepreneurial success in addition to your art practice, which you've shown is really intertwined. I mean,
Thank you.
it's very
It's cool the way that worked out. And it's still evolving. First and foremost, being an artist, being a visual storyteller is, it's a path and it's a long one and it changes. I've been told no most of my career and there's a lot of gatekeeping. And it's hard. It's hard. But I just kind of kept going, because I do think at the end of the day, the work speaks for itself. And you can't deny if the work is good or if you connect with it, or if somebody, does eventually call you to do a project, it's because the work is there. So I guess my advice to you is, figure out a way. I mean, if you want to be an artist, go for it. Live in a very affordable place.
Other people.
With maybe other people and learn to really love soup. I can say, yeah, I've worked for myself for over 25 years. I've worked with amazing magazines and I've done some incredible advertising shoots. And it's always been like this in terms of economy, So I think you have to be really dedicated and committed to practice. And
Does finding a niche or you do
I
a
think
lot of
finding a niche, I shoot a lot of food and that was that just happened by chance because I was getting a lot of these travel projects with magazines. And if there's a travel component, there's always a food component. And I discovered on a food shoot, I had an editor send me on a 2-part project to Chile and to Peru with this food historian. And I had never photographed food. But as we were walking through the markets in Santiago, she was like telling me about, how the potato came to this continent and who brought it, or how this ingredient came to this place and how they used it. And then how it went on to this country and how they use it. And I just had this moment where I was like, oh my God, food is a big story. It's a beautiful story. And no one was really documenting food culture. And I'm Mexican American. I mean, we're obsessed with food, So it was a very natural thing for me to go to people and usually when I'm trying to get in with a community, a closed community, the first place they invite you is to the kitchen, right? Would you like something to drink? Would you like something to eat? And so I just found myself really enjoying being in that space. Specializing in that really helped me. And it also afforded me an opportunity to get other work because I was also photographing food. You would never think, I mean, this is Kingsford charcoal. It's, they want to see beautiful briquettes burning, glowing, but I was like, this is a beautiful story about community and people. And that to me, if I see a billboard of that, I'm going to connect more with that than briquettes glowing, at dusk or something. Although a steak over the briquettes would be definitely, that would stop me in my tracks. But I've just always been drawn to story and I've let that fuel me. And just think about how you're going to make a living and maybe there's a side hustle you could do. Like maybe you're retouching, maybe you're doing commissions of clothing or, maybe you're painting portraits. In the beginning, I did weddings to just on the weekends to just make ends meet. So I think you just got to find a side hustle maybe. And the sweet spot is where your passion, your personal work and commercial work collide. And that's where I feel like that's the sweet spot. And that was the goal for me where I could tell these very important stories that I valued for brands that might not normally do that. That's my best advice. Buy a piece of real estate, rent it.
Yeah.
That's another idea, like buy the cheapest house you can find and just hold on to it and rent it. Because 10 years from now, it's going to be worth something.
Sorry, someone had something to say.
I think we had a question, but yeah, no, go ahead.
And I just want to work on this because I think you're undervaluating what you've done. Meaning, you're saying this. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying for me it was really easy to do anything, and the only reason because I wasn't scared to lose. And if I was in a stupid darkroom for 17 hours straight to pull one single print And then I ripped it. Well, actually, I don't rip anything. I fold it because I can't handle ripping my own photos. But I fold it and put in the garbage and start from scratch. The same for you. All of us, I think we didn't fear. I mean, how many times have I heard you speak and complain, oh, bloody thing's not working, it's the water. But you've still producing your work here. You've gone out and you're photographing food from portraiture to whatever, and you're back in the valley where you wanted to come back because you're going to do another project. And they are getting fiery, but you're here because you're scared to death. We had that conversation, but you're here. And I think that is the right stuff. Again, you're right in what you're saying. Buy property is the best one if you can afford it. I could never afford it, but I didn't fear. And I think that's something we all have to start understanding, that we can't be afraid because we're too afraid. And I think that maybe it's my age. I have no idea.
I agree. I agree. I think the biggest thing I did is I took a huge risk at the beginning of my career. I found a really good story and it was in Nuevo Laredo and it was at a prison. And the prison, I was reading the Loretto Morning Times. My aunt worked there for 50 years and I was visiting her. I was reading the newspaper. I was in graduate school and there was a little article about the prison on the border that was allowing the women to keep their children with them and up to the age of 6. And I was like, oh my God, that's going to be my thesis project. So I got access. I took a risk. It was terrifying. It was a co-ed prison in Mexico. I got access through a friend of a friend of a friend. And it was just like, being fearless and just taking a lot of chances and risks. The thing that you're most afraid of, I would say, do it. And now, especially because this is like an awesome environment. My goodness, this is amazing. Like what you guys have going on here. I want one of those studios.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Romeo. And I would love to take your question now.
Yeah, hi there. I'm Joe Sussy. I'm a particular university, obviously, department. As a number of my students and teaching a few classes in the private side, and a few of them are here. Typically, just want to say thank you for doing and sharing the work with us and hearing about both. I haven't heard about it today. I'll be hear about that as well. You answered a little bit about the two questions I had to ask. It was you talked about the conversation about commercial information that especially from the kind of the personal practice. And I wanted to ask a little bit, because for many of my students, they're aspiring designers, aspiring photographers, of the kind of first break that you made with that transition to commercial art. Ray spoke a little bit about that, but then we're also speaking briefly about you infused about your personal artistic practice and that commercial practice. And I think for many students, but for many kind of aspiring artists, as you can see, complicated emotions surrounding that transition.
Yeah.
And if you could speak either broadly or even specifically about when that moment had clicked for you, either in a project or different examples where you even found that the opportunities that were made possible from commercial side actually helped you mature as an artist in some
Yeah.
to further develop their artistic practice. I think that we will here.
Yeah.
I also have other questions for others as well. I'll let you guys.
Let me just make sure I understand. Was there a defining moment that helped me understand, a defining moment that helped me get into the commercial?
Yeah, and then if there are opportunities in the commercial sector that help, mature your personal artistic style, altered it in a way that you felt was particularly rewarding.
Yeah.
Personal side.
Yeah.
And those kind of nuanced shifts that occurred throughout the career.
It's complicated. It's a complicated question. So I started as more of a documentary photographer, and I started, when I say it started with National Geographic, that prison work I did, I sent it to National Geographic. I had no money in my checking account. What I did have, I FedExed this portfolio that I printed from the darkroom. I was like, this is the best work I've ever done. And they have an internship. And I don't know how many applications they get, but anybody can apply. I mean, you have to be a student, but I sent that work. I'd already sent a portfolio, but I was like, no, I just come back from this experience and it did change me. And I sent that work and they called me like 2 or 3 days later and they were like, well, young lady, whippersnapper or whatever, you did something. And they offered me the internship. And it was kind of a horrible experience. I mean, they did train me for 10 years and it was really horrible, but it was also, I learned a lot jumping to commercial, what I realized is I had to shed like all this idea of, being an observer and really trying to let people be who they are. And then me as the storyteller just waiting for that moment, In commercial photography, you're creating the moment. And that took me a minute to really understand how to do that. But here's what I can tell you. Find collaborators, find people that inspire you and collaborate with them on a project. Maybe it's someone who designs clothing and you want to do portraits and you guys get some of your friends and you do like portrait series with your clothing or something. I still do that. I collaborate with stylists, collaborate with chefs, I collaborate with so many different kinds of people. So I think collaborating with people that inspire you, who are also very creative and doing something that would, benefit you and their work together. I would say would be the biggest thing that I learned is that, oh my God, collaborating really does help you grow pretty fast. And that could look like a bunch of different things. It could be, I keep thinking about you, Noah, because your work is so beautiful, but all of your work that I saw today was really amazing, actually. But there's just opportunities to collaborate with other people. And I think that's what really helped me jump is when I was able to bring somebody else's perspective into mine. And I was like, oh, wow. And photos came a lot easier for me. And I do feel like my work grew and it became more marketable because of that. Yeah. And I would say like, get out of your comfort zone, like go to a different culture or go to a different town or a city and, do things that aren't your norm so that you can be inspired. I mean, this isn't my norm and I'm like with all of you and I'm so inspired. That would be the other thing, like change your perspective.
You also beautiful words to say about your photography and about the beautiful transformative effects of photography. I always think of Edward Rich's photographs of gas stations and like thinking about my sort of perspective as a viewer in that and how beautiful it is and how like Roman said, how loud but how still it can be. As people like who consume photography, who consume media, how do you each think photographs of place and space can help inform or alter our perceptions of those places and spaces?
I think this is a really important question because I think about two issues. One about sort of the intimacy that when we create, whether it's a painting or a photograph, that gets to the heart of place and space. Because place ultimately is space imbued with meaning, right? That's the definition. And so we bring that meaning to spaces. That's what makes place. It's personal connection. And so I think that any artist can really do that. I think photography today has the possibilities because in some ways because it is ubiquitous, right? We're so used to consuming it as a consumer. But I also think that as a medium of art making, that we have the ability to create unique pieces, to create things that are handmade, that are going to continue to separate it from AI, right? It's just going to continue. It's been diverging for some time. And I think that the importance in terms of the pieces as objects, it's going to become just even more, it's going to be more necessary for authenticity is because I was really just like, yeah, when you said that is exactly right, that authentic experience. And that's the same, I think, whether you're experiencing a piece of work or you're making it, right? It's authenticity that.
What was the question? Can you remind me? I'm sorry.
The space and place inform or alter our perceptions of those spaces.
I think you're right. Place is emotional. And I personally, for me to occupy space with my camera, I have to feel something. So that means I have to have a perspective. So maybe it's time of day and perspective for me.
I agree completely. And then it's a great question for me right now because I'm working on a new thing, which I'm calling coordinates point, because a place is just a place without the rest. It's just a place. So it's just a coordinates point. It's nothing else but a point that we can calculate, like mathematically calculate. Without us, it's meaningless in a strange way. It is. I mean, it is. There's, we can go further and talk about the importance of the history of that land and its culture, which is part of it. But at the end, it's just a physical digit number and nothing else. Without our presence, without our soul, again, I like it better, anima, our soul. Our soul has to be felt there. And in photography, I think is one of the strongest mediums. I'm sorry, I'm a photographer. I adore it, and I will never refuse it. In all aspects, from the darkroom for the alternative print to a digital print, I just love it because it's not just a recording device, and that's what it was supposed to be. Everything but a recording device. It's a device which is recording our emotion. I mean, you see this in every photography you see, and we see trillions on Instagram. There's a lot of good photography out there. There's a lot of very few photographers that can repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. But the objectivity is really nothing. It's like a place. A place is nothing without anything else. That's my. I agree completely, and I think it was beautifully said by you.
Thank you so much.
And that goes all the way back to Plato, his idea about polis, and Aristotle, and you can have the herbs, which is the physical geographical location, but without the civitas, the people who inhabit it, the soul, a place is just a place without that emotion.
That's why history is so important that we learn. That's why we are so annoying as professors, constantly telling you to learn art history. There's reasons why, because it's going to feed us. And it's our nutrient.
It gives you perspective.
All right.
It gives you perspective.
Exactly. Going back to crazy little Bart's, who he hit it pretty good. I mean, whatever he did that evening when he was writing those books was pretty amazing, because he hit some pretty amazing thoughts, or a bunch of people. I'm not sure ever anything is done by one person, because even my own personal work was not done by me only. And again, I don't say this lightly. I thank the people of the region. They've accepted me in here, and they made me think, and that has fed me in my thought process. The same will happen to you next week. Because when are you going out photographing tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting experience. I want to talk to you afterwards. Because I talked to you before, now I want to talk to you afterwards.
Gina, did you have a question too?
A range of MFA students, right out of undergrad to others who have past lives or multiple lives because of the age ranges we have. And I was thinking about Dan, you mentioned you were a field scientist before. I was wondering, like, were you making work before, and did that experience being a field scientist and affect what you started making after, or was it always there? Like, how did that influence you?
I think I would say, in it sort of started in undergrad. I was one of the first environmental science students that they had in this program. And sort of midway, I was like, I need to be making things, right? And I went to the art department and I was like, how can I do both? Because I was the first gen. I was putting myself through college. I had some scholarships. I was living at home, and I got there, and they're like, "You can't do that." And I was like, "Okay." Walked back to I worked in the great college greenhouse and managed that. And I was like, "Okay, I'll forget about that for now." And I'm just going to get myself through school. So and then as soon as I was done, I was lucky. I did land a job as a scientist. But as soon as I did that, I also started just going out I lived in an area where there are lots of schools, so I could sort of take all these studio classes and art history and just sort of feed myself that way, so that I could, I felt like I needed some grounding. And I would say that I think any artist you have interests other than being an artist. You don't make art for art's sake. You have something that drives you. You have a passion. You have things that you want to make. And so whatever that passion is that's part of what I think grad school is really good at. It's like helping you to figure out what those passions are, because that's what's going to drive you forward for your career. And I would say too that, so like, as I was working as a scientist, which I did for almost 15 years, right? I did that, and I was making and trying to figure out what it meant to be an artist and going to grad school. So it was like all these things. At one point they were very separate for me, because I was like, how do I because of also what I did at where I worked, I also was in business development and a leader in the company. And because of the work I was making, I was like, they had to be like as far away as possible in my brain. And then, I sort of went through this integration process in grad school, which showed me how I could, that it was really me. Like, it was just all me, right? Like, meaning that these interests in science and understanding relationships and climate change and ecology and the need to make were all coming from the same place, right? And so that's why I guess ultimately I'm trying to say is that it's all coming from the same place. And I think that's what I hope that grad students do, is that you find your passion, you find that thing, whether it's history. There's a great photographer teaches at William Mary. His undergraduate degrees in history. His name's Elliot Dudek, and he teaches photography, but his work is all based in history, US history, right? So I feel like most artists have a background in an interest, a passion in something else than just I make art for art's sake, right? There's something that drives that. And that's what you need to hold on to and let it propel you forward. Don't fight it, right? Because when you fight it, it just slows you down. And you ultimately end up there anyway if you're persistent, because you got to remember it's the marathon, not the sprint, right? And at Penny, you just have showed that, you have this longevity, you have a career. And I mean, I think that's very inspiring. And, sharing what your pathway looked like. And, all of us have had a different path. That's what's so interesting, is like most people don't get there the same way. You have your own way.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. I think that's an awesome thought to finish on.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming to welcome Penny to the Rio Grande Valley. And I hope y'all can all have a moment to maybe say hello to her or wave, and we could celebrate her a little bit more with some refreshments and just visit and catch up and discuss what we talked about tonight. And I hope we can take it with us in our future studies and teaching and collaborating.
Thank you very much for this.
Sure, thank you. Okay, well, thank you all for coming, and please stay and have a bite to eat, and welcome to the center. Thank you.
She's like, two people I know.